Today I will be painting a box of chocolates in watercolor. The supplies I am using today are as follows. I'm using a pencil and a Sharpie. I picked brown. I also have some scissors ready. I'll be using Posca pens to add decorations. I've got just a regular piece of construction paper, and then I have a little piece of watercolor paper. This is 6 by 8 inches, and I'm not even going to tape it down. I'll just leave it on my board. Now I'm going to go ahead and fold my construction paper in half, and I want to put half of a heart on my paper. I'm going to start on the folded side and kind of arch up to the top of the paper. And then I'm going to come down really close to the edge and then go all the way back down to the folded side again with a point to make my heart shape. And then I'm going to take that half of a heart and cut it out with my scissors. It's always a good idea to start off big, so make your heart extra big. You can always trim it down later, but we want it to be really a good size so that it will fill whatever size paper you are using. I made my heart extra wide too so that I could fit extra chocolates inside. So that's a pretty good shape. I'm going to trim just the top a little bit because I want it to be a little bit less pointed at the top. So I'm just going to add a tiny bit off, and yep, I like that shape better. All right, so this is going to be just the base of my candy box here. I'm going to put it down in the center of my paper, and then I'm going to go ahead and trace it with my pencil to make the heart shape on my watercolor paper. I'm going to try to make sure my heart doesn't move with my left hand, and then I'm tracing, of course, with my right hand. So now I have a nice heart to work with. I'm going to go ahead and use my Sharpie now to trace my heart shape so that it's darker. And I decided to go with a brown Sharpie just because of the chocolates being brown, the wrappers. I don't know, I thought brown would just be good. So I'm going to go ahead and trace this with my brown Sharpie. And I'm just kind of following along my pencil line nice and carefully, and going all the way down to the point. And then we'll go ahead and do the other side as well. Now I also thought it would be nice to make it look like the box was a little bit wider than just a single line. So I'm going to go ahead and make a second line to basically make kind of the outline of the box. And I'm going to paint in between these two lines so that it looks like we're looking inside of the box. You could even get fancier than this and add like little doily type designs or something outside of these lines to make it look like a really frilly or fancy box. But I decided just to keep it simple with the two lines. All right, now I'm going to do some floating shapes inside of my box. These are going to be the chocolates. And I'm just going to go for either like ovals or circles or kind of like longer shapes, kind of like this. You could even make them kind of soft squares, so squares that have kind of rounded corners instead of sharp corners. I mean, chocolates come in all different shapes and sizes. You could get really fancy and do fancier shaped chocolates. I'm sure they're out there somewhere. So I'm just kind of floating these shapes, and notice there is a little bit of space in between them because we do want to leave space for the wrappers of the chocolates. So I'm just kind of going around and paying close attention to kind of where they are. Notice the size of them for my 6 by 8 inch paper is about the size of like 2 or 3 fingerprints. So I'm trying to keep them big enough so that I'm not going too crazy doing like tons of teeny tiny chocolates. If it's easier for you to start with pencil, of course, feel free to do that. I'm just diving right in with my Sharpie and making all of these shapes. All right, I've got one more I think I can fit down here at the bottom, and I am liking how this is looking. Now I have sped up my video just a little bit to show you this next step. Next, I'm basically making a zigzag line around each of my shapes. So this is supposed to look like those little paper wrappers that the chocolates come in. So I'm just kind of going zigzagging all the way around. Notice that if my shapes are close together, the zigzags do touch each other, and that's not a big deal. They can run into each other, or sometimes I just have them stop if they run into another one, so it looks like they kind of overlap. But I'm going to go ahead and do these zigzags all the way around all of my shapes. At this point, I'm ready to paint. You can see that I started with the outline of my box, but it doesn't really matter where you begin. I went for a nice bright pink, and I'm just filling in between those two Sharpie lines with my watercolor. Now I am using mostly Holbein watercolor, but you can use whatever you have. And I'm using a Miyahime brush. This is a round brush, so it comes to a nice point. I'll probably just be using two different round brushes. They are about, I think, a size like 6 and a size 3 or something, so that I can get into some of these areas. Now you can see that I'm going to go ahead and start filling in the chocolates. And my goal with this is to try to get a variety of shades and values in the browns so that they don't all look the same. So I'm using some warmer browns. I'm adding a little bit more water to my brown for some of them to make them lighter. I'm using less water to make them darker. If you want to go super dark, you can add a little bit of blue to your brown, and that will make it super duper dark. You can also add a little bit of yellow to your brown to make it warmer. So play around with the different shades of browns with this, because it will make your painting more interesting later. Here's my blue mixed with my brown. It almost looks black. It's so dark. That's like extremely dark chocolate. So kind of have fun with that. I also thought it would be a nice variety to have some white chocolates, but instead of just leaving them pure white, I'm adding just a little bit of shading to them. I have just a little bit of purple on my brush, like a purpley blue works fine, and you can kind of keep towards like the outside edges of these just to give them a little bit of color. It'll just give them an extra dimension. I'll make them look nicer when they are finished. I'm going to kind of go ahead and do all of those. I wanted to have a good assortment of white chocolate and regular milk chocolate and dark chocolate. We just like all of it. So I have that all done. While that's drying, I'm going to go ahead and paint in between the wrappers. This is kind of a tedious part because you're going in and out of all these little zigzags. So I did switch to a smaller brush, and I'm just using the tip of it. This is a size 3, and I'm just painting black. I wanted it to look dark, like it's the inside of a box, so I decided to go really dark with just a black watercolor paint, and am painting in between all of these little zigzags. I'm trying to be careful. I mean, the nice thing is I used Sharpie marker, so the lines are pretty fat, which does help me kind of stay inside of the areas. And that way, if I go into some of the areas, it's not going to matter too much. But if I do have any paint that's still wet and I get black touching it, they will bleed together. So I am trying to stay away from any of my wet areas. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and paint in the wrappers. Now, it is a good idea to wait until when your background is dry before you start to do this so that you won't have the pink bleeding with the black. I decided to go pink with my wrappers. I could have done brown, but I thought that there was already plenty of brown in there that I wanted to kind of tie into like the outside of the box. So I went for the pink wrappers, and I'm going to go ahead and do all of the wrappers around each of these candies in pink watercolor. Before I do anything else, I wanted to add a little bit of shading to each of my candies. So I'm just going around and adding a little bit of a darker line kind of on the outside edge of each of the chocolates. This kind of gives the impression that they're not just a flat shape, but they actually are curved. So by adding just a little bit of a line around the edges of each of these chocolates, it gives the idea that they kind of, curve around down into those wrappers. So I'm going with just a little bit of a darker shape inside of each of these and kind of just touching up the outside edges to make them look like they are rounded pieces of chocolate. And I am trying to kind of match the colors. So like I wouldn't want to go super dark on a light one. I'd want to just make it a little bit darker than what is there. All right, now comes the fun part. So I've let all of my watercolor dry, and now I'm using a Posca pen to add some details, some pizzazz, making these look fancy. And these Posca pens are basically like acrylic paint markers, and they are my favorite brand to use because they usually just, they show up well. They usually look really nice. So I have my pink one here. And I'm basically just thinking of some designs and adding them to each of my chocolates. I thought it might be fun to do the swirls, as you can see, or the hearts. You can get real creative with these and design them basically in whatever way you would like. It's kind of a fun part of the project, kind of the icing on the cake, so to speak, or the designs on the chocolates. So I'm just going to go around with my pink and add some fun designs. Now, if you have a white one, you could also add white onto the dark chocolates. The white will cover the dark, which is also really nice. I think I'm just going to stick with pink and red for these since it's Valentine's Day and I already have the white chocolates, but I don't know. I'm just doing some polka dots on this one. It almost looks like an egg, but I'm sure it would be delicious, whatever's inside. And we'll continue to add some fun little designs on all of my chocolates. I hope you enjoy doing chocolates with me. I cannot wait to see what your interpretation of this box of chocolates would be like. Please feel free to share with me what you thought. I'd love hearing from you in the comments below. And thanks so much for watching. If ever you want other video tutorials, check out my YouTube channel, Ehlke Art. Thanks so much.